There's a new best case Sean Payton scenario available for the New Orleans Saints. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Whodat Nation and Whodat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Well, for those that are still in the playoffs, it's still crossover Thursday here around the Locked On Podcast Network, though not here on Locked On Saints with no game this weekend, but Prize Picks is the wonderful sponsor of Crossover Thursdays. No competing with other players. It's you versus the projections available. You just pick 2 to 5 players, choose whether or not they're going to come out at more or less than their Prize Picks projection. You get those right 10 times your entry, you can win. It's that easy. It takes about 60 seconds to input your entries. We love Prize Picks. We know that you will too. That's why we're giving first-time users a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 by using the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. On today's episode, 2 new suitors have called and asked for permission to speak with former New Orleans Saints head coach Sean Payton, the Arizona Cardinals, and the Houston Texans. One of them is a best case scenario for the New Orleans Saints. The other could be a best case scenario for Sean Payton, and they're not the same. We'll break that down, and we'll take a look with something we haven't looked at here on the show yet, a mock draft if the Saints were to agree to a Sean Payton trade with the Houston Texans. And that would be the New Orleans Saints right now out of the teams that are available: the Houston Texans, the Carolina Panthers, the Indianapolis Colts, the Arizona Cardinals, and then of course the Denver Broncos. 3 of those teams have requested to speak with Sean Payton, the Denver Broncos, and then now the Arizona Cardinals and the Houston Texans. The Texans right now would be the best case scenario for the New Orleans Saints. And I know what you're thinking, Ross, you're crazy. The best case scenario for the New Orleans Saints would be the Arizona Cardinals because they have the number 3 overall pick. Again, they ain't coming up from the number 3 overall pick in a Sean Payton trade. They'll probably end up, if he does end up going to Arizona, they would end up probably building a trade package around the early 2nd round pick for this year and a future first in 2024, as well as other draft considerations. Very unlikely to be the number 3 draft pick. I'll explain why here in a little bit. But the Houston Texans have the number 2 overall selection, which they also are not coming up out of, but they do have also a 12th overall selection, just 2 selections behind where the New Orleans Saints would be drafting had they not traded their first round selection or really advanced their first round selection with the Philadelphia Eagles to the 2022 season. That's the best case scenario for the New Orleans Saints. They could get the 12th overall selection, probably still get a future first in consideration as well, and additional draft picks and compensation. So imagine a 12th overall selection and let's just say a 2nd round or a 3rd round pick for this year, a future first and a 3rd or 4th round next year. Or you just do the John Gruden trade all over again, first, second from 2023 and 2024. Bam, you're all said and done. Now, are they just going to copy and paste that in a league that now values draft capital more than it did when John Gruden was traded, and a league that overvalues rookie quarterbacks more than they did back when John Gruden was traded? That's going to be the big thing, is that the market is not the same now than it was before. But hey, if you can get that number 12 overall selection here in the 2023 NFL draft, it opens up a lot of opportunities for you. You could still wait around and grab a quarterback in the 2nd round, or you're just barely outside of the top 10. If you want to get up to get one of the top 4 quarterbacks in a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, who would probably be well out of reach for the Saints, even with the trade up. But Will Levis and of course Anthony Richardson, if those guys are appealing to the New Orleans Saints, they could then move up. And then, of course, depending upon what happens with Hendon Hooker, let's say that his medicals look great all throughout the NFL draft process and the lead-up process there, or maybe Max Duggan raises his draft profile, then all of a sudden some fifth quarterback could potentially sneak into first round conversation, and the Saints at number 12 overall would be in great position to be able to take advantage of that if that person checks the boxes for them as well. So for the Saints, the Houston Texans selection right now might be the best overall sort of best case scenario as compared to wherever the San Francisco 49ers pick ends up, which is what you would be getting in the Denver Broncos trade. And then, of course, a high second round pick and a future first when it comes to the Arizona Cardinals. So which one do you take there? Really, really easy to say, yeah, the second round pick. Because if you're the Houston Texans, you don't feel any pressure to come up out of the second round selection because you have the 12th overall selection. You know you need to solve the issue at quarterback. So you're looking at drafting a quarterback at number 2. Now, would Sean Payton, though, here's the caveat, because this is the catalyst for any potential trade that would be made involving Payton, is would he want to coach in Houston? And I think a lot of people would immediately say no, because ownership has been a little, shaky. Nick Caserio has been a little shaky as well. So there's pieces here to where people have kind of drawn their conclusions a little bit early and said, no, I don't think that Sean Payton would want to go there. But something to remember, imagine Sean Payton getting as much control, say, and freedom as Bill O'Brien. If you're going to give that kind of control, say, and freedom to Bill O'Brien, you're sure as heck going to give it to Sean Payton as well. So could that mean that Sean Payton comes in and says, yeah, I'll come in and help rebuild your team with that second overall selection, get the quarterback that I want, blah, blah, but Nick Caserio's out of here and I'm bringing in my own thing. Then all of a sudden it creates the same situation that Sean Payton would get in Arizona. Or a similar situation than what Sean Payton would get in Arizona. And that's effectively what they gave Bill O'Brien. Heck, they made Bill O'Brien head coach / general manager for the most part. They gave him the whole job and said, you can do it. So if you have that kind of faith in Bill O'Brien, of course you're going to have that kind of faith in Sean Payton, who would want to bring his folks with him to help rebuild your program. Now, does Sean Payton want to undergo a multi-year rebuild? And if he does, what makes the Houston Texans more appealing than the New Orleans Saints in that case? Well, the Houston Texans got the draft capital. Right now, the New Orleans Saints don't. So it's either, to me, now that this is on the table, it sort of pushes the New Orleans Saints out of the equation when it comes to a potential return to New Orleans, because Sean's going to see what he's got available elsewhere before he decides whether or not, hey, actually, I'd like to be back in New Orleans. So again, that just becomes more and more unlikely as more and more teams get involved. And now you're watching for other teams to potentially get involved after the first round of the playoffs as well. Do the Dallas Cowboys, end up moving on from Mike McCarthy if they get bounced in the first round? Do the Los Angeles Chargers move on from Brandon Staley if he has some in-game issues, which is something that's plagued his tenure in Los Angeles so far, in a first-round matchup against the AFC South champion Jacksonville Jaguars? That could put him in hot water. What happens with the Los Angeles Rams and Sean McVay you're also watching, and then, of course, you're also watching Miami loosely. Miami would be absolutely nuts to move on from Mike McDaniel after just 1 year, but hey, there's been some, not reports, but rumors around it, so something worth watching out for. So the Houston Texans might be the best case scenario in the New Orleans Saints' eyes, but what's the best case scenario in Sean Payton's eyes of those that are open right now? It's absolutely the Arizona Cardinals. We'll talk about why and break it all down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. There's also a new offensive coordinator on the market that could be of interest if the Saints move on from Pete Carmichael. We'll look at that as well. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Bet Online, your number one source for all of your sports wagering information, odds, lines, props. They've got news, articles. They've even got podcasts for you as well. I know you love some sports podcasts as you tuned in to this one. You want to see some odds on where Sean Payton might end up next, or you want to check out odds on maybe who's being favored in some of those other markets where there are head coach openings and where Payton fits in on a market by market level. BetOnline's got you covered. Yeah, they got it like that. Go and check them out today. BetOnline, you're going to be able to find it on your mobile device, your laptop, whatever it is that you use to browse the internet. Just head over to betonline.net. And don't worry, there's more than just the NFL as well. NBA, MLB, NHL, and then even other stuff too, like esports, auto racing, golf, which is a ton of fun to bet on, by the way. So go and check them out today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at Ultimate Pro Football GM. I absolutely love this mobile app. It's one of my favorites. Keeps me entertained all the time, even when I am at my absolute most bored, because I love me some football. And y'all know I'm the nerdy guy. I love the numbers, right? I want to manipulate the salary cap. I want to backload contracts. I want to kick the can down the road. I want to fire and rehire and move on from coaches and coordinators and all that. I could do all of that. And so can you with Ultimate Pro Football GM. All you have to do is check out the app, which you can find super easy over at ultimate-gm.com. It'll hook you up directly to whatever your game store is, or just search Ultimate Pro Football GM in your app store. And bam, you're all set. And don't forget, you can also get a 100% free boost to your franchise by using the promo code Locked On in the game shop. It's a 100% free boost with the promo code Locked On. Once again, that is ultimate-gm.com for the Ultimate Pro Football GM app. You can find it in your app store. Start your dynasty today. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. The Houston Texans could be right now the best case scenario currently of positions that are calling, or open head coaching positions that are calling about Sean Payton for the New Orleans Saints. But that's not going to be the best case scenario of the open positions for Sean Payton, right? Those are going to be a little bit different. Let's discuss why. Appreciate you as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available everywhere. And of course, you can go and check out Locked On Sports Today as a part of your listens as well. I was on today's show talking about why the connection between the Arizona Cardinals and Sean Payton could make a lot of sense, but it's all going to come down to the health and well-being of Kyler Murray. Sean Payton likes Kyler Murray. You can find clips of him talking Kyler Murray up during the combine here recently on Colin Cowherd's show, so on and so forth. But Kyler Murray is dealing with a pretty big injury. How soon is he going to be back? Is he going to be ready for 2023? Is that something that Sean Payton's willing to deal with? Now an injured quarterback who is, kind of smaller in size. And so there might be a longer injury history awaiting him in the future, all that other stuff. So there's a lot of question marks around the quarterback spot. So which becomes the better position for him? The Arizona Cardinals with a young quarterback that you need to kind of see how things are going to shake out with, or the Denver Broncos, an older quarterback, but one that is incredibly talented and somebody that wanted to work with Sean Payton in the past and that you're sure Sean Payton would love to work with as well. I'm going to go with the younger quarterback in the Arizona Cardinals, but there's one specific reason why. We've discussed this here on the show before. I know you might have heard this already, but it is important. They also have a general manager position open where Sean could bring an executive with him that he trusts, like a Jeff Ireland or a Khai Harley. And then if things don't work out with Kyler Murray, he's got all the support that he needs and all of the trust that he needs to be able to move on from guys. Look, one of the things that you're going to see wherever Sean Payton ends up next is the downside, right? That he comes with. We saw it in New Orleans. Didn't invest in those skill position players, particularly at wide receiver at the high points in the draft, with the exception of Michael Thomas, for years and years and years, because he thought that he was going to be able to elevate that position with his scheme, elevate that position, of course, with Drew Brees. And it worked. That's what worked most of the time until it didn't anymore. Is Kyler Murray the guy that can elevate those other players? Maybe, maybe not. DeAndre Hopkins looks like he's on his way out. That would be a perfect spot for Sean Payton. So maybe if Sean Payton does end up liking that job, part of that stipulation is, hey, don't trade D-Hop, or trade D-Hop, get the extra draft capital on, and then use that in a trade or whatever, right? So there's a whole bunch of different ways that they would be able to do it. But the reason why it's the best case scenario for Sean Payton is because he can turn all of that over to the guy that he trusts in Jeff Ireland. So the idea of having sort of the control over the roster doesn't all fall to Sean in that case. He can pass some of that over to Jeff Ireland, just like the Saints did when the drafts really started to kick, 2015, 16, 17 in particular, and so on, to where things really started to turn around in terms of the Saints' ability to be able to find the mid-round selections, hit on the second-round picks, all those things that work. Now, they had some misses in the first round. We've seen that, a half sack for Marcus Davenport in a contract year, not great. But outside of that, you see, outside of the issues in the first round, you're seeing a lot of success building this team through the draft. We've seen it with Trey Hendrickson, though they let him walk. We've seen it with Marcus Williams, though they let him walk. Do those things start to change with Sean Payton and Jeff Ireland in an Arizona situation? Could that be part of why Sean Payton was like, nah, I'm cool here. Let me go and see what other opportunities I can get. Those would be things that he would be able to change, and the Arizona Cardinals would give him the freedom to do that, and would allow him to have sort of his own check and balance system of his general manager that would A, take care of things, B, see the roster the same way that he does, and C, not get in his way. And so because of that, I think the Arizona Cardinals are Sean Payton's best case scenario in terms of the jobs that are open right now. Everything changes if the Rams surprise and move on from Brandon Staley if they get bounced by the Jacksonville Jaguars in the first round of the AFC wildcard game. Everything changes if Miami foolishly moves on from Mike McDaniel after just 1 year. Everything changes if the Dallas Cowboys get bounced in the first round and then Jerry Jones says, I got to get my Sean Payton fix. Then everything shifts, right? Those become best case scenarios for a guy like Sean Payton. But right now, in terms of what's available, it's the Arizona Cardinals. So what that means, though, is that just because it's his best case scenario in terms of what's open, does that mean that that's enough to get him back to coaching this year? Because there is still the possibility that he doesn't take any football job and he's right back in the studio when it comes to Fox on Sundays. There's still a chance that that happens. And that's something that we have to make sure that we're understanding as well, that just because these jobs are open, they might not be the jobs that are really going to entice him back to coaching just yet. The Saints would still own his rights in that 2023, 2024 offseason and could potentially revisit this later on. But before we start turning to that gear, let's see what other jobs open up during the playoffs. Speaking of jobs opening up, still nothing from the New Orleans Saints. Don't expect anything this week, just like we spoke about a few days ago. But next week, when they start kind of going over everything, what basically Mickey Loomis, general manager of the New Orleans Saints, has said is that they wanted to remove all of the kind of emotion and being too reactionary, those possibilities from their evaluations. And so they're going to handle all of that stuff, having these conversations over the course of this week, probably into next week. We'll hear from Mickey Loomis at the Senior Bowl, if not sooner. So there's a lot of time before any decisions have to be made. The New Orleans Saints can't even really interview any type of coordinator candidates for a little while anyway. So there's not really going to be a hurry to move on from the one that they have in the building while they're trying to evaluate what went right and what needs to be worked on. So keep that in mind. But if the Saints do end up moving on from Pete Carmichael or moving Pete Carmichael out of the offensive coordinator position, and they're looking for a new offensive play caller in 2023, someone to keep in mind here is Bobby Slowick, who is somebody that we talked about with the San Francisco 49ers. But the guy that I used as the sort of archetype for why he would work was Mike LaFleur, who went over and helped out the New York Jets. They looked great over the course of their first 9 games. Then all of a sudden, the quarterback situation went up in flames. They had also lost their running back in Breece Hall, and then everything just went to doo-doo after that. But that's not on Mike LaFleur. He kind of got scapegoated here. He's somebody that's coming from that Shanahan system. He is somebody that's going to get a job somewhere very, very quickly because everybody saw what happened in New York. Everybody saw what happened with the Jets. That was not on Mike LaFleur. So don't rule him out as a possible target for the New Orleans Saints if they do indeed open up their offensive coordinator search. Coming up next, we're wrapping everything up with a quick 4-round mock draft for what it would be like if the New Orleans Saints got the second of the Houston Texans first round selections, as well as, let's just say, a 3rd round selection. We'll do another one later with a 2nd round selection, but let's play it conservative for today. We're going to take a look at that and how the New Orleans Saints could completely rebuild their team in just 5 selections if they did that. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. In today's episode of Locked On Saints, brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market. And now you ain't even gotta go to the website to get your hands on a Built Bar now. I'll tell you where you can find them here in a moment, but let me just tell you a little bit about Built Bar. If you're somebody that's looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want to have to deal with all the fat, calories, things like that, you gotta try Built Bar. You gotta try Built Bar. It's super easy. With Built, health is actually tasty. Seriously. There's so delicious when it comes to these Built Bars that you don't actually think that they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution as well. So they've got 100% real chocolate that covers each and every one. That's right, real chocolate, not skipping on anything there. And you got some unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond, some of the favorites here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. There's no better protein bar out there. And now, not only can you find them at Built.com, you can find them in some big box stores as well, like Walmart and Sam's Club. Walmart, you can find a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puffs. Over at Sam's Club, you can grab yourself a 13-bar box. Yeah, the nice baker's dozen of their hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. Don't worry, you'll see them there. You can thank me later. Or you can, of course, check everything that they've got to offer over at Built.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at sort of what would happen if the New Orleans Saints did trade Sean Payton's rights to the Houston Texans and brought back from that trade the 12th overall selection and then the 73rd overall selection. So that gives them both a round 1 selection and a round 3 selection. I could have been greedy. I could have said round 2, but hey, we're here all offseason. We're going to go through all of the different things. Sean Payton can't even talk to them in terms of an interview until the 17th. So we got time. And yes, I said 17th because I'm having fun today. We're having fun on the show. So in 5 selections, the New Orleans Saints could completely rebuild their roster on both the offensive and defensive side by addressing their top 5 needs on that list. Then they would have an additional 4 selections to address some of the other pieces that they need as well. So we've talked about the needs that the New Orleans Saints have on the roster. They include, but are not limited to, chill your comments out, edge rusher, quarterback, of course, is number 1, halfback, safety, and defensive interior. There's a big body possession receiver, especially if they move on from Michael Thomas and there's a split. Honestly, even if they keep Michael Thomas and there's not a split, get another big possession receiver in the building just in case the injuries continue to creep up. There's, of course, other positions they can continue to look at as well. But right now, I focused on 5 picks, 5 positions of need, and trying to get the best player available at each of those positions. Round 1, pick 12, I came away with one of my favorite prospects in this entire NFL draft. The New Orleans Saints need a change at prototype when it comes to the edge rusher. Yeah, it's good to have speed to power conversion, but sometimes it's good to just have raw speed, raw athleticism coming off the edge, and a guy with a pass rushing plan that's a little bit more refined than the guys that they have tried for in the first round in the past. Tyree Wilson is the guy. Texas A&M, he is Pro Football Focus's number 10 overall player. Getting him at number 12 ain't that scary an idea, considering how many of those quarterbacks might leap up into the top 10 that aren't necessarily top 10 guys at across the draft as a whole. Again, the NFL overvalues the young quarterback, but the New Orleans Saints don't need to stay away from young quarterbacks this year. They need to roll the dice. So why not roll the dice at pick 41 with Hendon Hooker, the wide receiver? He looks like a wide receiver sometimes. That dude is fast. That quarterback out of Tennessee. Yes, I know that the system that was built to him used a whole lot of wide receiver options. Well, guess what? The New Orleans Saints do too. It's not that big a deal. You have to refine any quarterback that's coming into the NFL from the system they ran in college to the system that you want them to run in the NFL. Incredibly accurate in the short and intermediate areas. Also can get it done with his legs. Those are the things that the New Orleans Saints need. But hey, it ain't too bad to have a big arm that can get the ball downfield and that understands how to read defenses. That's something that Hendon Hooker does. If you give him a half-field read, he gets it. Then you just got to coach him up. Coach him up into getting the full field reads in. These are things you're going to have to address with any rookie quarterback anyway, so you might as well take the one with the highest upside if the medicals all check out. Pick 65, getting into the 3rd round, Tank Bigsby, the Tank, out of the University of Auburn. Get yourself a big running back, or not really big. He's not a huge guy, but he is a between the tackles thumper, and he is somebody that finally gives you maybe that of a little bit of a power back that could do a little bit of other things too, but that power back to kind of get that Alvin Kamara boom and zoom feel back. At pick 73, the 2nd selection in the 3rd round that I swindled from over with the Houston Texans, I went with safety Brandon Joseph. Gives you a little bit in terms of what you can get done in the box, but isn't afraid to drop back into coverage, though his strong suit would be playing a little bit more of the Tyrann Mathieu role. Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May, I expect them back in 2023, but you're going to need somebody with a little bit of versatility that can do a little bit of both, just like those two can, because you might be missing Marcus May for a few weeks. So it'd be great to go out to free agency for that, but if you need to bring in a young guy, Brandon Joseph out of Notre Dame is a really solid selection. And finally, pick 105 in the 4th round. This gives us our 5th selection. Let's go with our 5th biggest one of our 5 biggest positions of need, defensive interior. And let's go to Alabama to get it done. Byron Young. Yeah, I did a lot of SEC in here, and so should the New Orleans Saints. Byron Young out of Alabama, 6'2", 6'3". We'll see what his official measurements are. Just under 300 pounds. Probably want to bulk him up a little bit more. He's got a little bit of a tweener, thing going on, but that's not really who he is. He is an interior defensive lineman. He's great in the run game, and he's really good in the pass rush game as well. A handful of sacks this past season. That he's done that a couple of times. Consistent pressures on the quarterback, consistent interior pressure, really good push, resetting the offensive line, great anchor, gets it all done with the lower body strength, everything that you need. He checks a lot of boxes. Will need some polish. He is a 4th-round pick after all, but that's okay. You'll take that. So if he can come in and help you get that push on the interior of the defensive line, and then you bring back David Onyemata, you bring back Kentavious Street, you bring back a Shai Tuttle and or Malcolm Roach, but you add a guy like Byron Young who can get that interior penetration, who can help to push and reset the offensive line, who can beast out in the run game, it changes the complexion of what you're able to get done on the defensive interior, and especially improving this game as a run defense where they very much struggled in 2022. A couple of other places that I didn't address just going through the first 5 selections that the Saints would have late round selections to take opportunities with include a big possession wide receiver like a Jonathan Mingo, for instance, out of Ole Miss, or interior offensive line and even tackle to help to shore up some of the depth that you want on the O-line. All right, y'all, coming up tomorrow, Friday, it'll be a little bit of a recap episode. Let's make sure you know everything that has happened for the New Orleans Saints throughout the week, and of course, get you updated on any new developments when it comes to Sean Payton or the potential New Orleans Saints coaching staff. And of course, we'll take a look at what it is that we want to hear from the New Orleans Saints moving forward. We expect to see some pressers here in the next little bit, whether it be between now and, of course, the Senior Bowl. What do we want to hear from Mickey Loomis? What do we want to hear from the New Orleans Saints? We'll break it all down on tomorrow's episode here on Locked On Saints. Appreciate you as always making me your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget for your second listen to go and check out Locked On Sports today. Get all the news around the world of sports from the Locked On local experts, giving you the local insight that nobody else can provide. Find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Oh, and hey, quick milestone thing for you. I was interviewed on the New Orleans Saints official podcast on the audio platform. You can find it wherever you get your podcast. Myself, Aaron Summers, as well as Taryn Walk from over at NOLA.com. Make sure you go and check that out. Run up those numbers so they don't regret bringing your boy on. So go and check them out. No, it was a lot of fun. It was a blast being on that show. So make sure you go and check that out as well whenever you get the chance. Appreciate you as always. Make me a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.